Evening.
All right. Let's see, you sent us something about point counts. I can't do that this year.
Do you want to band it tomorrow morning, Steve?
I can maybe deal with that a little bit better than
Sent us something about point counts.
leaving like in an hour.
You can release your video order here.
So I would say yes, Dylan, if you want to, and Neil, maybe we can do it another night this week.
Did you see I got 2 towies this morning?
I did. You didn't tell me loop sizes though. Do you need a refresher?
I put on a 24 and a 23, and I at first thought the 23 was a little snug, but I don't think it was. Once it settled on him, I think he was fine. So I think I'm a little worried that the 24 are still loose. And now I think maybe we should just go down to 23, but
Okay. Well, I have 3 more. You have two 24 still, right? I can tie 3 23s.
yeah. And maybe get rid of the 26 and the 25. I think they're too big.
Okay. We'll have to collect those back up and cut them.
But honestly, I mean, at some point I'm done catching them because they're
You're running out of tags?
they're not very cooperative. And 2 of the birds I've caught, by the way, were birds banded last fall during fall migration. So I find that interesting that like they're local still hanging around then.
Hey, fidelity.
I guess so.
Have you been able to look at data yet, or you just can tell which nodes they picked them up?
I was waiting for the data waiting for CTT to pick up the rest of the nodes, and they still haven't. And I'm kind of perturbed about that because it seems like they should have by now.
I explained them on the commission board field trip this morning. I'm pretty into it.
Let's see if it got them.
We have a chat. Deep cleaning to all.
No, it still doesn't have them.
Painless.
Why is it not getting those other nodes? Looks like it got that one.
No, but it's 6:31. I think she's trying to give us a little wink and a nudge to get started.
Who's giving us a wink and a nudge?
Wendy said she's ready.
She's all set.
Oh,
Live. We're on the YouTube,
we've been on the YouTube. We're just chatting.
not my tube.
All right, we can get started. Hello, everyone. It's oh, okay. Thank you, Zoom. Got a small group tonight. Hi, Bob. Hi, Darwin. Hi, Ron. Hi, Scott and Denise. And hi, Vicky. So I'm Dylan. I'm the field ecologist and entomologist with the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. And Steve, you want to go?
I'm Steve Campbell. I'm the conservation biologist.
And I'm Neil Gifford, conservation director.
It looks like the top of your head is missing because your hat is like disappearing in the background.
Now just my hair is missing.
He's gonna say it still looks like the top of your head is missing.
Thanks a lot.
No, I'm not too
All
far
right,
behind.
so thanks so much for joining us, guys. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. I'm gonna put in the link for the form site if you want to submit any pictures that you have questions about. I'll put my email in there as well. Otherwise, you can just pose the questions right in the chat box or into the Q&A. What are your burning
Q&A,
questions?
Where do we see the questions if they put them in Q&A? Do they pop up or only you can see them?
I'm going to say only I can see them.
No, we can see him under Q&A.
Yeah, you
I can see the chat.
There's a Q&A, like it's a different button.
Learn something new with Zoom every time. It's too many boxes.
So yeah, the field season is progressing. We're getting ready for some bird work. So we're gonna start operating our summer breeding season bird banding station tomorrow. Should be starting with our point count surveys next week. The point count surveys kind of give us an idea of who's where, maybe maybe like a rough assessment of how many. And then the banding gives us an estimate of productivity and survivorship because we're identifying individuals and following them through time.
Wait, I'll start with a question then. So you're starting maps tomorrow. I thought you were going out to do towhees.
No, maps. Yeah.
What does MAP stand for?
Monitoring avian productivity and survivorship. There are in any given year between 300 and 500 of these stations that operate in North America. And they actually just partnered with MOSI in South America, which is the study of overwintering survivorship. And we all use the same methods so that the data can be pooled and we can look at population trends for species over time and across the wide area. So it gives us good information about the pine bush, but it also contributes to this larger understanding of bird communities, and even bigger now that we're connected with these South America stations, which is pretty cool. So for that, we have 12 nets that we operate at one of our stations. We open the nets usually half an hour before sunrise is what we aim to do. So I'll be arriving at the office at 4:30 tomorrow morning. And we'll hopefully hopefully we'll get the nets open by around 5 o'clock, and then we'll check the nets every hour. We'll check them more frequently depending on the weather. And everything we catch will be brought back to a central location. We'll sex them, we'll identify the species, we'll sex them, we'll age them if possible, and we'll give them a band that has a unique identifier on it, so that if we catch that individual again, that's how we learn about how long they live and whether or not they're breeding in the area.
How many years have we been doing maps?
We started formally in 2012, I believe.
13. Yeah.
12 was
12,
the
yeah,
first
12
year.
was the pilot
12
year.
was the pilot year. We missed the first couple of periods. So yeah, I think this is our 9th year of banding birds in that same location.
All right, thanks, Scott. We're struggling here. Scott says, hi, not sure if this is the right forum for this, but curious about the relationship between the Albany Pine Bush and the Wilton Wildlife Preserve, which we visited today. Oh, cool. Seems like similar habitat, but much fewer staff there. Do you know if they monitor the Karna blue populations there? Neil, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, they do. So the two habitats are similar, and there is pitch pine and scrub oak and lupin and the native grasses and wildflowers up there as well. What they've been doing a lot of work to thin overgrown forests, so there's not much pine barrens left up there. It's mostly more of a oak savanna or a pine oak savanna kind of a habitat, but they do have Karners, and I think they are monitoring Karners, but it's done through the DEC. The Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park is much like the commission, a partnership between the Nature Conservancy, the local municipality, and the New York State DEC. Much of the preserve in Wilton is actually part of the Saratoga Sand Plains Wildlife Management Area. And DEC does hire and supervise seasonal science techs to monitor Karna butterfly populations at a number of sites in Wilton. I don't know how many sites they cover or what the population numbers are like.
Yeah, I think Mr. Campbell, Dr. Campbell actually used to run their numbers for them, but we haven't seen them in a few years, right?
We have a question from Miss Wendy Cranny. Did I pronounce that correctly?
How many acres have been burned so far this year? I'm not sure. Do you know? It's over 200, right?
217 is the official number. Yep. Tyler thought he had 226, but part of the unit he just burned by the interstate exit 24 exchange was actually part of a wetland, so he subtracted the wetland. So
Okay.
it's only 217. Yeah, the unit's name is Heron, and it's right on the shore of the lake, and it has a big wetland. We didn't burn it.
Oh, bummer. Lost some acreage.
Yes.
But for perspective though, a good year would have been what normally
Normally
historically?
200. 200 was always our goal.
Right, but how often
Ideally, it would
did you
be
meet that?
10% of the preserve in a year. So 10% of 3,000 is 300 acres.
Right, but 200 was not a goal that you typically met. So the fact that he met it already this year he's doing pretty well.
Tyler's been meeting that 200 goal for the last 4 or 5 years, minus last year due to COVID. So we have another question from Scott and Denise. Is Wilton part of the Karna recovery plan? It is. So there's a federal recovery plan for the, Steve, do you want to take this?
What's that? No, go ahead.
You want to take this? I do all the talking. No, you do. No, because I might end up talking about fire again.
I didn't see the question.
So is Wilton part of the Karna recovery plan? You know,
Oh,
right now, not the
That's
budget.
that's a fluid thing. Wilton is, but other parts up there were and aren't anymore because of the Saratoga Airport used to be that was in the Queensberry recovery unit,
No, that was called Saratoga West.
Saratoga West.
There used to be four. You had the Pine Bush,
I'll pull up the
Saratoga
map.
Sandplain, Saratoga, yeah, pull up the map. So we've got the Pine Bush to the south, the Saratoga Sand Plains, which is part of the Wilton Preserve. You had the Saratoga Airport area, which was considered Saratoga West, was the name of that recovery unit. And then you had a recovery unit in Queensberry. Queensberry is almost null and void, except for the fact that State Parks has added a huge piece of property to the north end of Moreau State Park that they are tentatively thinking about managing for Connors and having a population there. But the federal recovery plan and the state recovery plan, Scott and Denise, both include the Saratoga Sand Plains as a potential recovery unit. The federal plan says that we need 3 recovered metapopulations in Glacial Lake Albany, which is the map I think Steve's going to pull up here in a sec.
Yeah, sorry, I went off the U drive. I shouldn't have done that.
And New York State draft recovery plan is actually calling to restore all 4 metapopulations. But with the latest expansion at the Saratoga Airport and changes in how they manage the habitat within the airport, it's really looking less and less likely that we're going to be able to ever have a viable population at the airport. So the FAA, working with Saratoga County, it's a county airport, is currently working with the Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park and DEC to mitigate what they're losing at the airport by adding and managing close to 200 acres as part of the Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park or the Saratoga Sandplain Wildlife Management Area. But yeah, Wilton is definitely part of the plan. There you can see it on the map, and right in the second from the top there, the 4 red circles. So in this map, you're looking at basically the northern Hudson Valley. You can see the Great Sag, I believe that's Lake George. Saginaw is off to the west, Lake George near the top. And the tan yellowish colors are the Glacial Lake Albany sands. The Pine Bush itself used to cover at least 25,000 acres on that delta, that sand delta around Pine Bush Preserve. But you can see going north and south, there's a lot of glacial sand deposits. Most of those moving north, historically, most likely held pitch pine scrub oak barrens and successional northern sandplain grassland, various forms of pine barrens. But yes, there's 4 remnant recovery areas in Glacial Lake Albany. The federal plan calls for 3 of those circles to be restored and viable. The state plan, it's still draft, but it's actually looking at trying to recover all 4. If you look at the Queensberry circle at the north, you can see that big oxbow on the Hudson River, and that's the rough area where State Parks now has a chunk of land that's about a little over 800 acres in size that they are looking to restore a Karna population there. But good question, Scott. And you can see the white line on this map is basically the entirety of the federal Glacial Lake Albany recovery unit. So in the federal plan, there's 1 recovery unit in New York, and within that, there are 4 remnant populations of Karna.
There are all the federal recovery units. We have 1 federal recovery unit in New York, which is what's blown up here, and 4 state recovery units within the federal recovery unit here.
State recovery areas, just so we don't get our terminology.
You're right. Although here it says, this is TNC's map that says New York State recovery units.
All right. Thank you. We got a question from Darwin. I get this common bird nesting incubation question when I lead trail walks. Thanks for leading trail walks, Darwin. Birds often lay their eggs over several days, but they are usually all on schedule after incubation to hatch on the same day. What is going on with the embryo development to put them all on the same hatch day?
Nothing.
They're not incubating.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is that they're not incubating them, so they're not developing. They're kind of in stasis.
Maybe really slowly they're developing, but
Yeah,
Not until the clutch is complete do they usually start incubating, so they're relatively synchronous.
So she'll lay an egg a day for as many eggs as she lays each morning, typically first thing in the morning. And then she only starts incubating after that last egg is produced. So they all hatch in the same time. Sure, Calvert.
The only kind that's different though is for raptors, right? Because raptors.
I was gonna say I thought it was different for raptors because there's usually like a dominant like firstborn that can actually kick the younger guys.
I wonder if part of that is that they lay eggs and start incubating so early. Like eagles are building nests in February and early March to have fledglings ready to go by like the end of May, early June.
Well, and also if they don't incubate, the eggs might freeze, so they might have no choice but to incubate then. But it does create like a hierarchy, and so the dominant one, if in good food years, maybe all the young will get enough food, but in not so good years, the bigger ones usually will outcompete the smaller ones for the food. And then if there's not enough to go around, the small ones usually get the short end of the stick.
It can be cool.
At its most sad. Steve, Wendy has an interesting question. Well, I guess it's for any of us, but I'll give this one to Steve. Yeah.
Definitely.
Have you ever gotten results from a research project that were completely surprising?
I don't know. Need some time on that one.
The Karna numbers last year kind of blew us away. That was
well.
So many in the field, we had an idea it was going to be big.
Right, we had an idea in the field that we knew it was going to be insane, but yeah, I guess maybe it was a little bit bigger than we would have guessed based on that. It's like the numbers you don't really know until we plug it in with our detection probabilities and stuff to know how big it was. But we sort of had an inkling that it was going to be sort of off the charts.
I was really surprised by where the prairie workers go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of knew that they went down that way. Ours wound up in Hispaniola. It was sort of
pretty big.
Confirmatory. I think that Eastern Whippoorwill was the one that was sort of most shocking. The one that we found was all over the place from here to Fisher's Ferry and everywhere in between. It was a little bit surprising because we thought they were here.
I know when I did the bee research in 2010 that was looking at the that the effects of the mow and herbicide treatments, I really expected to see an improvement or a more diverse or a more abundant community of bees in the treated sites, because the scrub oak thickets just completely exclude basically nesting resources as well as pollen and nectar resources, or at least that's kind of what I expected going into that. And I didn't see a negative effect, but I didn't see a strong effect as I thought I would. And I think that's because I probably artificially kind of bumped up those numbers because I did not crawl on my hands and knees in the scrub oak thicket to place my bowls and do my sweep netting. I did that where I thought the bees would be, which was on like fire breaks or trails adjacent to. So I think that what I demonstrated is that the bees were probably using those corridors. And
I think implicit bias or biasing our data.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I wanted to catch bees, but what I should have done is actually go into the scrub oak thicket because there wouldn't have been bees.
So Dylan, you think they're responding at that fine of a niche, or that fine of a geography? That there was a difference between just that narrow path through a scrub oak thicket relative to what would have been underneath the thicket?
Yeah, I do. But I also think that it's hard because the pine bush is such a matrix. No site exists independent of the sites around it. So I think likely we were sampling bees that probably were like living and existing more in adjacent sites that have been treated, and we're just visiting those trails. So yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing to tease out in field research in general is, no, your site doesn't exist in a vacuum. So are you really looking at a treatment effect, or are you looking at the bee community surrounding that site that are kind of coming in to utilize it? And I think that's probably more what I was seeing with the bee community was like adjacent communities were using that corridor, those trails and those fire breaks. I highly doubt. And I mean, based on talking with other researchers, Joan Milam in Montague Sand Plains, she did get down on her hands and knees and put her bowls in scrub oak thickets, and she didn't catch anything in there. So she saw a much stronger treatment effect.
I would add to the question that it's not necessarily the results of our research, but I think we've had some surprises in terms of we've managed, and then all of a sudden we've had species like pop up, and it's more anecdotal than research results. But we had the red-headed woodpecker show up.
Oh yeah.
Yellow-breasted chat
Yellow-breasted
over by the landfill.
Yep.
So occasionally we get some species that kind of surprise us because they're ones that the habitat should be sort of appropriate here, but we don't necessarily see them. But sometimes we do.
Your eyes open for sandhill cranes in the wetlands.
What's that?
Your eyes open for sandhill cranes in the wetlands.
Yeah.
They're in western Massachusetts.
I mean, obviously there's insect ones that Dylan can speak more to, but I know that those have been a few surprises for us bird-wise.
Yeah, I guess that is true. Neil Shopman found some really rare leps, and they were in the most highly managed areas, which is so counterintuitive because I mean, are they in adjacent sites that they're just so low numbers that we're not detecting them, or are they persisting in these sites and then it's just easier to find them, or like because they don't survive the fire. So
No, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about. We used to think that Karnas couldn't survive fire either. It was pretty cool last week. Even I did not expect to see Karnas in the alley cat burn, like in the middle of the burn, just because the patches of remnant lupin were so small. There were Karnas flying around out there across the black. I'd watch them. They'd come to a lupin plant and stop. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw them out there too.
Those moths are all up pretty high, so they could actually, a lot of them are, not a lot of them are up in the plantings. But yeah, Neil said that not most of those moths are not big dispersers. So for him to have found them here, they've likely persisted. It's not that they've moved in like whippoorwills 20, 30 years later.
And also, during point counts, we noticed huge flocks of grackles and robins for whatever reason descend on the burns as well.
Yeah, that's right.
That's was certain things surprising to us. We don't really know if it's just a bonanza of insects or what's going on in there, but there tends to be a lot of them in those burned areas.
And the orioles, what's with the orioles, post-fledging orioles? There's a period every summer where we'll get like a ridiculous number of orioles moving through the Truax Barrens.
Yeah, I don't know. They I think they flock up together before migrating, and then crazy numbers of them. I don't know if we'll get them this year. Steve, I was telling Neil, I'm not sure what we're gonna get at our banding station. I'm not, because we burned half of it and the other half is mowed. So
you're expecting a light morning?
Yeah, I'm not super worried.
Well, that's part of what we're doing this for, right? Is to see how these things respond to management. And so if it's a low year, then we'll tie that to management, and as it regenerates, we'll see how it goes.
Yep.
Well, even if the birds are out there, those nets are going to be so visible.
Yeah. Another thing that's hard to tease out with field research. Are they not there, or are you just not catching them because your nets are like neon signs? Wendy said, what are some future projects that you hope to conduct?
We have the black locust removal project on the horizon.
Yeah.
Talk about it, Steve.
Well, we have that black patch of, we've been removing black locust for years now, and we sort of have an idea of when we remove it, we replant it, we basically turn them from southern successional hardwood forests into successional northern sandplain grasslands. Wait, I have a graphic for that.
It's gonna be Steve saying.
Is Trooper there somewhere? Is that what I'm hearing?
He is, but he there's his feet. He gets edited out. He gets blue screened out.
Right, so we start with, oh, I gotta share my screen. Right, so the idea is we have these black locust stands, which are totally not suitable pine barrens habitat, and much of the vegetation that's holding out underneath, because the black locust forms these dense stands, and it's basically a closed canopy forest, and then it basically shades out all of the pine barrens vegetation underneath. So the way we deal with that, the way we have been dealing with that, is we've been removing the black locust, cutting it down, pulling out the logs, ripping up the stumps and burying them. And then we come in and we're basically bringing it down to the sand. Was it George Robinson said we're basically taking it back to the Pleistocene? We're basically taking it back to, this is probably what it looked like 6,000 years for vegetation encroached. So we're basically taking it down to naked sand dunes, and then we plant it, and then we grow back. And this is essentially taking it from a southern successional hardwood forest to a successional northern sandplain grasslands. Right, but really what we're after here is pitch pine scrub oak barrens, because this is a globally rare community that we've sort of been charged with increasing the distribution of. So we've been sort of doing this work, but we haven't really, and we've sort of been monitoring stuff at a gross scale. But I think what we're really interested in doing is some of the research that's been going on, especially through Union College, is saying, well, we're turning them to this, but these are really not true barrens yet because they don't have a strong scrub oak barrens component. And so we're interested in looking at ways, can we jumpstart the grassland and get them to barrens? And so we have a patch of, do you know how big that black locust patch is up on Kings Road Barrens?
Around 50 acres, 50, 60 acres.
About 50, 60 acres. So we're going to try to look at that a little more experimentally than we have before. We're going to remove the black locust, stand over that patch, and then we'll set up study plots within that to look at how our management puts that on this trajectory of grasslands to barrens, and then how can we advance that we're going to try planting scrub oak by acorn or by seedlings, or we still haven't worked out exactly what we're doing yet. We're also looking at incorporating ectomycorrhizal fungi to see if that helps stimulate the scrub oak to become established. And I'm not sure if we're going to have a fire component, right? We have some variables. We still have to sort out sort of our things, but what we're looking to do is look at a little more this question a little more experimentally of how do we get from these black locust stands to pitch pine scrub oak barrens. So that's.
And we are seeing some of the successional northern sandplain grasslands finally, after 20 years, begin to look more barrens. Like the Discovery Center field, right behind the solar panels at the Discovery Center, is probably one of the better examples where that thing's been cleared for close to 20 years, and finally scrub oak and the couple remnant pitch pines that were out there are spreading, and it's looking more and more like barrens every year. So we're confident that it will happen, but we're looking at, are there ways for us through our management to expedite that process and get more of the pitch pine scrub oak barren? But I only say that because getting a locust clone restored to the grassland is still a huge step forward. One, we've gotten rid of the invasive species, and two, we've filled that niche with native plants that we can now manage with fire. And we're seeing native wildlife moving into those sites. Hognose snakes, prairie warblers are on the edges, owies, field sparrows. So it's certainly a positive step in the right direction of getting that former locust clone on the pine barrens trajectory. But the research questions that we're interested in looking at are really about, are there ways for us to expedite that are actually logistically feasible at scale?
Awesome.
Thanks for the quick work with the slides, Steve.
Trying.
He's got a reference for that. Wait, what did you say? You've got a visual? He's got a visual. I will say, first off, I'm super excited about the bee study that we're doing for the RCN project. This is a regional conservation needs grant. It's a federal grant that was given for looking at pollinators and xeric habitats in the Northeast. And so it's a big scale project, but here locally at the Pine Bush, we dug into this project really deep. We've got 5 sites that we're monitoring. 2 are controls, 2 have been burned this spring, and 1 hopefully will get burned, at least partially maybe. And we're looking at the bee community and the vegetation change. And I'm really excited about this project because I just did a bee survey last week. And I'm walking out in these, black scorched earth, right? What's left after a burn. And there's not a whole lot going on, but the bee bowls, I got bees in the bee bowls, like way more than I thought I would. And I actually, because all the vegetation was cleared, I found a bee nest, like an Andrina. She flew right in front of me and clunked right into her hole. So just right out in the burn. So I'm really excited to see what we find with that research.
Does that suggest that she survived the fire in the ground, or
she could have, but she may have moved in. I don't know. I doubt we'll be able to tease that out unless we see more of that particular species following the burn. That could suggest that they moved in because it was now suitable. But
that's super exciting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool. And then ones that I'm hoping to conduct is, so the Northern Saw-Whet Owl was project that I started. I was just kind of curious, I figured they probably flew over, but do they use the pine bush as a stopover during migration? And so we started operating this saw-whet station, and we catch like a decent number of them. And I'd like to take that to the next step, which would be finding out if they're overwintering here. And I think it was the winter of 2019, 2020, a birder did find a saw-whet in the pine bush in January. So I think that's really cool because they don't breed here. But if this is a habitat that supports them during the winter season, I think that's super cool. And then their research suggests, like other research from other sites suggests, that they really like more shrubby type habitat during the winter time.
So do we put CTT tags on them or GPS tags?
Maybe. Yeah.
GPS tag, I would think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be a cool project in the future. And then I was also going to say, and Wendy kind of touched on this because she asked what animal species do we know the least about. It's an incredibly frustrating animal so far, but the smooth green snake, I really want to understand their biology and ecology in the pine bush, because we only know them from one region of the preserve, and we don't know why that is, if they're trapped there by development or if it's the habitat is particularly suitable. So we've tried.
They might have been released,
or if they're even still there.
I know we haven't seen one in a long time. So we've tried a few different things. We tried radio tagging one, but they're too small to. Usually with snakes, you like surgically implant the transmitters, but they're too small to do that. So we tried an external mount, and she slipped out of it pretty quick. So that kind of tanked. And so now we just have a system of cover boards over there, but we have never found one under the cover boards. I actually think that we should switch to wood, or maybe put pair wood and rubber boards to see if we can get them over there. But just right now, we're just having a problem in even encountering them enough to learn anything about them. But they're a species that I would really like to understand better.
Spadefoots.
Ugh,
yeah, spadefoots. I'd like to, since predators drive a lot of the populations below them, I'd love to study the raptors in the preserve and try and locate nests and see what kind of trophic cascades they really putting on small mammals and birds.
I actually thought I heard my first, and I listened a lot because I was like, is this just a blue jay? But I'm pretty sure it was actually a red-shouldered over in Diversity last Thursday when I was out doing the bee survey. So that was exciting. I haven't heard one of them in a while.
Yeah, that's where DEC had them nesting, was over in that ravine. Scott Procol from DEC Central Office used to monitor. There were 2 nests over there. They moved. So a nest that they had used for a long time, they abandoned and built another one next door in another tall white pine tree.
Nice. And I just heard Coopers yesterday, enough that it's funny, you first hear them and you're like, what's wrong with that woodpecker? Like, it sounds so nasally. And then I like corrected, and I was like, oh, it's a Cooper's hawk. Let's see. A question came through. Did a burn go awry across from the Discovery Center? The pitch pines look scorched.
No. You want me to take that, or you want to try that one?
No, go ahead.
All right. So that management unit is called Brogue, and that's our first entry into that management unit. And it's one that has been incredibly difficult to burn. So we're actually quite happy to see the pitch pine, the tan browning needles you see is all from heat scorch. So that just suggests that the fire was pretty hot, which is actually what we wanted for a first entry of a restoration burn. If you remember from last time, we talked about restoration fire and maintenance fire. So on that unit, we were really looking to get a good hot fire. And in particular, that area has the pitch pine are pretty dense. So the trees that are the most surrounded or most crowded are actually going to be the most stressed and least healthy trees. So some of those may actually die, if not from the fire itself, from native bark beetles that will likely move in or have already moved in. But no, that fire was actually exactly what that site needed. A good hot fire to try and thin out both the overstory, but also because we hadn't burned it before, it has, that litter and duff layer that's 3-4 inches thick. And Tyler, that hot fire did a phenomenal job of eating away those decades worth of organic matter to expose mineral soil, which was what we need to get lupin germinating and New Jersey tea germinating and pitch pine germinating. So no, that was a really good fire. Oh, their question just popped up to me. West of Old State. Yeah, there's actually two over there, Scott and Denise. I'm not sure which of you is asking the question, but so there were two separate management units across from the Discovery Center on the south side of Old State Road. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so the Brogue unit was like 15 acres, right adjacent to 155, and that was the more dense pitch pine forest. The area in the middle of that section of the preserve is called Bivy, and Bivy is more of a maintenance burn. It looked more like what's behind me in my background or behind Dylan and her background. Some really high quality pitch pine scrub oak barrens that had been burned before, and that one was a pretty mild fire, and that's exactly what we were looking for because we had already hit it hard. So the litter and duff was gone, mineral soils exposed. So at this point, we're just trying to keep it in the real high quality status that it has. So that unit burned. Bivy is on a maintenance cycle now, and I think Bivy burned last 7 years ago, 13.
That sounds right.
We were doing maps over there. It was the first or second year we did maps over there.
Might have been 14.
Maybe.
Yeah, we had a couple.
6 or 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was actually one of the biggest Karna sites last
14.
year. It was one of the sites we walked. Thanks, Steve. 14.
Yeah.
Last year we were counting butterflies. That site had some of the densest Karna blue butterflies that I've ever seen.
Oh, which actually brings us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to go to another question.
I was just going to say that the Bivy burn, when he was done, had patches of unburned lupin, like what's behind me in my background.
Yep.
So there were lots of butterflies that survived that fire.
Yeah, I got a photo of a female right on the ash, right on the black scorched earth.
Well, and now if you look walking through it already, the lupin is like an inch or two high already after the fire. And the females are laying eggs all over that stuff. It'll be interesting to see what we get in the second brood.
Yeah, I think it'll be awesome. Which actually kind of brings us to Scott's other question. Will there be butterfly survey again this summer? And yes, we actually were able to hire our seasonal staff this year. So we've got a seasonal crew. They just surveyed today, and that was their third survey of the first brood. So yes, we are back to normal surveys this year, which is very exciting that we were able to do it. It kind of precluded us from some other work because Karnas are kind of a priority. So there was some other work we weren't able to get done when we were all doing the Karna surveys, and we weren't able to start them until the second brood. So it's super exciting. It was kind of frustrating that it was like the most Karnas any of us had ever seen, and we could only sample a subset of our regular sites, and we only did the second brood. So
hey Steve, do you have a map of the whole study area showing the preserve? Would you happen to have that available?
Yeah, you mean just the protected area?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did last week that I'm really excited about is we went out and collected 25 female Karners, 12 from Firebrand in Firebrand's East, which is the big blue patch of lupin you could see if you drove north along 155 by the Discovery Center. We collected 12 females from Firebrand.
Got lupin. Did you want lupin?
Just to preserve. Go back to stop at the lupin map. There. Nope. What? Nope.
You don't want the lupin map if you're going to talk about lupin batches.
He's getting
I
there.
don't think it's on the map, Steve. That's why I didn't.
Okay.
So can you go up to this? Can you put your cursor on the zebra piece?
That
Right up next to that
is,
big northwest. Yep, that big horseshoe right next to that big open field that's not protected.
Nope, up
You can up
Up.
north. Up,
north of the
up,
thruway.
up. Keep
There it
going
is.
there. Nope, left. Left.
I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to see where Curry Road is. Is it
You
this
see that big
horseshoe?
open-
Yes.
Yes, that one. So there's a really small remnant patch of butterflies on that little 1 acre to the west of that by about, I don't know, what is that, a quarter of a kilometer? Maybe half a kilometer. I can see it on this map, Steve. Do you see the little 1 acre piece? Yep, right there. So that has like a tiny little patch of lupin on it that's historic and a little patch of butterflies. And through the work of the New York State DEC, secured a grant with the Nature Conservancy from the Fish and Wildlife Service to buy that piece of property next to that big field, Steve, zebra. The zebra piece, all of that acreage to your east, there. So all of that acreage was protected with a federal grant to DEC that I helped write. And it was from a pot of money called the Recovery Land Acquisition Grant. And the whole idea was we bought that to restore it to Karna habitat, and that was like 15 years ago. So that's a site that Joel and the contractors have been working on starting like 5 years ago to restore it to Karna habitat. So now it's a carpet of lupin underneath an open canopy of mostly oaks and a few pitch pine. So because that remnant population of butterflies and that little tiny piece is so small, we're actually going to jumpstart a new subpopulation on that piece of property that we refer to as zebra so far because that's who we bought it from, but it was the name of a company. So last Thursday, we collected 25 female Karners. The folks from the New Hampshire Fish and Game came over, took those females back into the New Hampshire captive rearing lab, where they're going to spend the rest of their days in a solo cup with a fresh sprig of lupin every day. And the females lay their eggs in the lupin leaves. The interns and seasonals there harvest all those eggs and then rear them to pupa. And we're expecting at least 1,000 pupa back. She thinks the 25 females we collected will probably produce on the order of 3,000 butterflies in the lab.
Oh my God. And so are some of those, I meant to ask you, Neil, are some of those going to New Hampshire?
Yeah, so we're only getting 1,000 back.
Okay.
And the rest will augment the population in New Hampshire, both augment it genetically and augment it size-wise. Based on her distance estimates, they dropped to like 900 last year.
You're putting 1,000 into that one site?
Yeah. Yep.
That's like an eighth of all that we've reintroduced.
Well, what we've learned from the other, do you have the release map, Steve? Do you have that handy?
Mhm.
What we've learned from the releases that we actually stopped doing in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2015. So all of the different colored dots here on that map are the years that we released butterflies into those sites. And we were releasing 500 or more butterflies in each of those sites. So it really helps to release a lot of butterflies. If you put just a small handful of butterflies into really good habitat, they don't find enough of each other, they just keep on moving, and they'll move right out of habitat that's otherwise perfectly suitable. So by inundating the site initially, we're really maximizing the ability to jumpstart a subpopulation. As we talked about last week, each of these sites, we only released butterflies once, and they all took. And persisted now, what? That's 6 years ago we stopped doing that. Well, we're going to jumpstart one more population just because it's so isolated and fragmented. What is your favorite place in the preserve and why? That's a hard question. I like them all, Wendy. Except for the Locust Colony.
I think the best view is up on top of Andromeda, which is the unit that you walk, like when you go in the Truax Trail Barrens and like you're walking that dune you're walking towards, that's management unit's called Andromeda. And if you go to the top of that dune, I think it's one of the best views because that's some of our highest quality pitch pine scrub oak barrens. But yeah, that's Trixie.
My favorite view, like I love Karna Barrens West because it's how I imagine the pine bush looking before it was all fragmented. I think the stand density and the rolling dunes over there, it looks great. But it's also right next to the thruway, so my favorite spot is in the Truax Barrens also. It's just quintessential pine barrens, what inland pitch pine scrub oak barrens we think should look like. It's actually right behind Steve's head in his background. We have the spacing of the trees, the spacing of the scrub oak, lots of grasses and wildflowers. It's just, and the wildlife is just, it's a phenomenal spot. And that's where we have at least 2 whippoorwills based on our work last week.
Blueberry Hill is cool too, because Blueberry Hill seems, that's where like some of the rare things seem to be holding on, like weird things. So that's where Grace Barber found the northern record for Forelius. I'm probably going to get the species name wrong. I want to say Prunosis, but I don't know if that's it. And what's that?
An ant?
Yes, it's an ant, and that's the only place she found it. It's the only place where a lot of rare things are found. And I don't know if, I mean, I think that was one of the first protected areas of the pine bush. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, but it's also unique over there. It's different. Probably for a few reasons. I mean, a lot of it was surrounded by locust clone. There's some high quality barrens, like right in the very, very center of it. And then I think some of it, Neil, was like old ag fields or something, right?
Yeah, a lot of it was chained, like that whole east end down by Gherkin. Right, that's our Karna site.
Yeah.
It was bulldozed and chained before the Nature Conservancy and the city protected it. So there was a big development that was going to go in there. The development was shut down for some reason. I don't know the details of that. But yes, they went through with 2 bulldozers and a chain between them, just ripping trees and stuff out. So it's really heavily degraded. But I wondered, Steve could talk more about it, if Blueberry Hill is so unique because it basically it's completely isolated and you had packing going on. Is that the right term in conservation biology? When you got species kind of stuck in a spot?
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe.
There's a term for it. Maybe that's not the right word, but
there's funnel relaxation that's probably happening, right? Once it became fragmented, then we've slowly probably been bleeding out species from there just because they're going to sort of randomly go extinct. And if they can't recolonize, then that's happening. Species packing could happen if they'd have to be crowding in.
For the longest time, there was just a tiny little core of barrens left over there.
But right, you can only pack so many, species. You're talking species, not individuals.
Yeah, right.
So,
you got tons of hognose over there. The only place where smooth greens are left.
What's going on, Steve? You okay, buddy?
no, I'm choking on my own spit or something. I don't know what's going on. Sorry.
Yeah, allergies.
Got a tickle in my throat that I can't get rid of. My tea's too hot to chug it. Ugh.
Yeah, I feel like your favorite spot kind of depends. Like, Madison Ave's the best spot for lady slipper orchids. There's I just found early azalea on the backside of the dune that we walk for fall banding in Fido at Carter Barrens East. There was like 4 or 5 big, beautiful plants of early azalea, which smelled phenomenal. And Jesse said, Jesse Hoffman's our botanist, he said that's one of the field characteristics for that species is the smell. And man, that was beautiful. And then I've got a spot for Lily of the Valley on the power line, Crossgate's power line. And then Bird's Foot Violet is a cool species that's over in the Truax Barrens. So yeah, I mean, it really depends. So plants have different spots, views have different spots.
Well, like when butterfly milkweed's in bloom, to me is my favorite spot wherever it's like super orange.
Yes, that's
I really
pretty.
like that. I really like that one.
And I love Fern Gully on the Yellow Trail before you bust back out into the Barrens. If you could do the loop clockwise, all that skunk cabbage and open fern forest underneath the red maple.
Yeah.
Not to mention our vernal ponds are pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I just found that huge marsh that was just a couple years ago. I think I went out with Carl Parker to look for spotted turtles out there, and that was the first time I'd ever walked back to that huge marsh. That thing is
Good job.
huge. It's awesome.
There's gotta be like marsh birds back there.
I had a Virginia rail one morning. I don't know if it stuck around there, but I saw it, kind of flushed it up. So that was cool. Oh, what did Scott say? Dylan, what about the half-day butterfly species survey we did on July 4th, 2020? Is that planned for this summer? It is planned for this summer, Scott. That is the North American butterfly count. It's done by the North American Butterfly Association. We've kind of hopped onto that. Michael Gottschfeld is the guy who runs the count for this area. His point circle includes the Pine Bush, and he also goes up to Fisher Ferry in the afternoon. So he's been doing that for like 20 years. And so we've just kind of hopped on recently to help him, like give him some more eyes on the ground to document stuff. So that is planned for this year. I don't think Jody has it on the schedule quite yet because I have not confirmed the actual date of the survey. It'll probably be July 4th or 3rd this year, because I think that's the Saturday is July 3rd. Yeah. So yes, we are planning on that. Depending on where we are with COVID, we might have to limit the number of attendees we can have come out to actually do the survey.
We're really hoping that some of those restrictions get lifted here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Seems like state employees are the last state employees, which we are not. We are a participating employer, but all of the state agency staff and participating employers are the last to kind of get the word from the governor's office on how we can move forward. We're still working with our COVID plan from last June.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I don't know. Steve,
We're
did you
at
really talk about
7:21
your
now.
favorite place?
No, I mean, I get my best Pine Barrensy feeling, I think, in Truex Trail Barrens, like you said, over around that whole trifecta of Alley Cat, Asphalt, and Andromeda. I really like.
I thought you were going to say your office, because that's where all the magic happens.
I thought about that, but I thought that would be too jokey to say. The Discovery Center was my favorite place. That's not really part of the preserve. No, otherwise, like I think it varies depending on what's in bloom. Like, right, you go to a place where the lupin is popping. That's currently like, wow, this is awesome. That's kind of your favorite place. So, yeah, I think like on an average across the season, I would say it's Truex Trail Barrens, but it varies. I think depending on what's in bloom and what species are where, and what.
That's a good point. I think about Karna Barrens West when the New Jersey tea is all in bloom.
Yes.
It's just carpeted over there. You can
Or
smell it.
draperies. Draperies is good for New
Draperies,
Jersey
yep.
too.
Yep. It's
It
all
sounds like we're
beautiful
talking
and
in
deep.
code because we're using all these words. Draperies is what is along the Purple Trail in Madison Ave to your left. That's the management unit draperies.
I think Wendy's trying to trap us with some sort of trick question. I think it's all special. That's what we're supposed to be saying.
I think she's
all
trying
our
to get
favorite.
us outside of our data-driven responses.
Do we have any other questions from our audience? Any burning things you've been meaning to ask, or any equipment you saw in the preserve?
Right. Well, it's 7:23.
Neil's got a mini 7-minute lecture ready to go.
Wendy, does John have any more questions?
Well, that'll take us for the next hour.
That we'll completely avoid and talk about, something else.
Or we could end it early tonight. Although Steve and Neil, I have a question for you. I don't know if it's possible for us to stay on, Wendy, after we stop going live, just to chat.
Stop recording. But
Yeah.
I would just I know Scott and Denise and Darwin. I'm not sure about Vicky, Ron, and Bob. I have not actually opened the participant list on previous of these, but for those of you that have been here each week for the last 3 weeks, I want to thank you for joining us. It's just been one of the highlights. I was a little curious about how this would go initially when the idea was proposed, and it's part of an online Lupin Fest, but it turned out to be something that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think everybody asked phenomenal questions, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do this again, either through Lupin Fest next year or
Semi-annually.
at some other point.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's super great. Yeah, Scott says no more questions from Denise or me, but we want to sincerely thank you all for having these. Highly informative and great. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, thank you so much for coming,
You.
Scott and Denise, and being
Listening to
so
our stream of
supportive of our
consciousness
work.
sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Just hearing us talk and kind of bounce off of each other in terms of what we're thinking about. So, I mean, I don't think you're not going to twist our arms to talk science as long as we're being helpful to you guys. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coordinating these, Wendy.
Oh, thanks, Vicky, and thanks, Darwin and Bob and Ron too. Oh, we got a question. Hang on, people.
All right.
Nerds of a Feather was the perfect series title. Thanks, Darwin.
Sit down, Darwin. Okay.
Yeah.
Nerdathon also was probably a contender. Hollywood Nerds.
Thanks, everybody.
All squared up. Who knows?
Wendy, thanks for putting these up on the YouTube.
Okay, Wendy says she's ending it. Okay.
And-
Okay.
Any attendees are leaving unless, is anything top secret that the attendees can't? We only